I have 10 tips that are gonna help you install your baseboards faster and better. Now, if you're a pro, this is gonna help you make more money because you're gonna get the job done faster. If you're a DIYer, it's gonna help you move on to more interesting projects sooner. So let's do it. Tip number 1 is to batch your processes. Now, one of the best ways to save time on just about any project is to batch your processes. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna measure all of your baseboards at once. You're gonna cut all of them at once. And then you're going to install them, as opposed to measuring a couple, going out and cutting them, going and installing those, and then going and cutting a couple more and installing those, and going back and forth in and out of the house. And that adds a lot of time to the project. So by batching, this is one of the biggest time-saving tips I have. And a lot of the other tips I'm gonna share in this video are going to be how to batch this process without compromising quality. Tip number 2 is to create a detailed cut list. Writing down all your measurements in an organized way is gonna make the entire project go way faster and be a lot easier. So here's what you want your cut list to look like. First, you're gonna organize it by room so you know where the baseboards go. Then you're gonna write down 3 values for each baseboard. You're gonna have the length, you're gonna have the left cut spec, and you're gonna have the right cut spec. So for example, for this baseboard, I would write down the length, and then I would write down I-45 and O-45. So that means I'm gonna cut the left side for an inside corner, and I need to cut it at a 45-degree angle. And the right side, I need to cut at a 45-degree angle for an outside corner that's going to wrap around the wall. That gives me everything I need to know in order to cut the baseboards. Now you can use whatever notation you want as long as it makes sense to you and it's consistent. Tip number 3 is to measure accurately. When you go and measure your baseboards, you want to measure to the nearest 1/16 of an inch. Now for baseboards that are going to fit in between 2 walls, you're going to want to round down to the nearest 1/16 of an inch, because if you try to cut it the exact size or a little bit longer, it's never going to fit. For baseboards that are going to wrap around a corner, you're going to want to go up by 1/16 of an inch, because if you cut these too short, then you're going to have to recut the baseboard and you might have to waste some materials. So go slow here, take accurate measurements to the nearest 1/16 of an inch, and this will save you time. Going slow here is going to save you time because it's going to help you avoid mistakes and have more accurate cuts in the future, so you're not going to be running in and out of the house recutting things over and over again. Tip number 4 is to have a couple scrap pieces of baseboard laying around while you're measuring, so you can measure outside corners more accurately. That's because outside corners, they need to wrap around the wall. So the baseboard needs to be longer than the wall by the thickness of the baseboard so that the baseboard can effectively wrap around the wall. So you could set your baseboards on each side of the wall and then pull your measurements from the baseboard to get a perfectly accurate measurement. Now on odd corners where it's not a 90-degree angle like this 45-degree angle right here, it helps to put some tape on the ground first. Grab your scrap piece of baseboard, draw some lines on it so you can see where the corner of that baseboard is going to be, and then you can pull your measurements from that corner to get a perfectly accurate measurement. So again, you only have to measure once and cut once. And that, again, is one of the biggest ways to save time with baseboards. Tip number 5 is to label your baseboards as you go with the room that they belong to. Now, if you don't do this and you cut all your baseboards at once, you're gonna end up with a giant jigsaw puzzle, and you're gonna be trying to figure out where 100 different tiny little baseboards go, and it's gonna waste a ton of time. So write down what room each baseboard goes in as you cut. Also, cross off your cut list which ones you've cut. And one more little bonus tip here, cut your longest baseboards first so you can cut your small baseboards with what you have left over, so you don't have to seam a whole bunch of baseboards and have a messy install. Tip number 6 is to not cut your baseboards at exactly a 45-degree angle. Here's why. The drywall mud buildup in the corners makes it so they're not perfectly 90 degrees. And what happens is that drywall mud buildup makes it so if you cut these at a 45-degree angle, it pushes them out and it creates a gap there at the bottom. Now on these inside corners, it's not that big of a deal because you can easily caulk it as long as it's a small gap. But on these outside corners, it's especially important to cut this at like a 45.5 or even a 46-degree angle. So that way you don't have this gap on the end, which is very difficult to caulk, if not impossible to completely hide. So you're gonna cut your inside corners at 44 or 44.5 degrees, and you're gonna cut your outside corners at 45.5 or 46 degrees. Tip number 7, forget about coping. Yes, I said it, you don't need to cope your baseboards. If you don't know what coping is, it's a more complicated process for cutting your trim to fit it together on the inside corners. It's really useful when you're installing crown molding, but for baseboards, unnecessary. Unless you're installing stain grade wood baseboards, you should not worry about coping your baseboards. It's much easier to simply miter your inside corners and then use a little trick that I demonstrated in my last video. You can view that by clicking up here for getting perfect inside corners. Tip number 8 is to use MDF, medium density fiberboard, instead of wood. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. First, it's less expensive. But the main reason is that it's easier to work with. It's straighter because there's no bowing or warping. It's easier to manipulate. If you have uneven floors, you can easily bend it. It's easier to cut, and it comes pre-primed. It also doesn't shrink with moisture changes in the air. So normal wood will tend to shrink if it dries out, and then you'll have gaps in the corners, where MDF doesn't quite do that as much. Tip number 9 is to paint your baseboards before you install them. This keeps you from having to mask off the floor when you paint your baseboards later, and that's gonna save you a lot of time, and it's also gonna look better because you're not gonna get paint all over the floor. I still have 2 more tips to share. If you like this video so far, make sure and like and subscribe below. Tip number 10 is to not worry about finding all the studs to nail your baseboards to. So you don't need to have your stud finder in most cases. Here's why. The bottom of every wall, there's what's called a bottom plate, which is what all these vertical 2x4s are connected to. So about 1.5 inches off the subfloor, you have a board, a 2x4, maybe a 2x6, running all the way across. So here's the side view. So let's say you're nailing in your baseboard. As long as you're nailing about 1.5 inches up from the floor and at a slight downward angle, you're most likely going to hit that bottom plate unless you have extremely thick flooring or something like that. And in that case, you'll just nail a little bit lower. And that'll usually be more than enough to secure your baseboard to the wall, and then you have the caulking on the top to secure it even further. Another place you can reliably find a stud without having to locate it with a stud finder is near a door jamb or in the corner of a wall, because there's pretty much always gonna be a stud there. That eliminates an entire step of finding every single stud to nail to and should save you a significant amount of time. And tip number 11, which I know people aren't gonna like this, some people aren't gonna like this one, but it's to not fill your nail holes. Skip that process. Just don't fill your nail holes. Otherwise, you're gonna have to go around with some wood filler, every little tiny hole, fill it up, and then go around and sand it, and then you're gonna get dust, you're gonna have to clean that up and fill it. Here's what you should do instead, okay? First, use an 18 gauge brad nailer. If you use a 16 gauge brad nailer, the nails are gonna be huge and you're gonna wanna fill those because they're gonna be very noticeable. But if you use an 18 gauge brad nailer and you just paint them afterwards, the paint is gonna fill that hole and it's at least gonna cover up the black. There's still gonna be a small dent there, but pretty much nobody is gonna notice this. Unless you're building a model home that's gonna be in a magazine, or you're working for a high-end customer on a very nice custom home, filling every nail hole in your baseboards is just a tremendous waste of time. But obviously that's a philosophical question on whether or not you wanna do it, but that's my personal tip. I hope you found these tips helpful. If you have any other tips of your own that you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And finally, if you fancy yourself a skilled DIYer and you'd like to make good money fixing stuff for other people, visit me at handymanstartup.com, where you can learn how to turn your existing home repair skills into a profitable part-time or full-time handyman business. Thanks for watching. I'm Dan Perry, and I'll see you in the next video.